Hello, I'm Peter Bell, and I'm here with Mr. Tony Baressi from Triumph Gold. Hello, Tony.
Hi, Peter. It's great to be here with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Very nice to be talking to you again. It seems like just yesterday it was January, and we were talking about everything Triumph following Roundup. Here we are in June, about to head into July, and a very exciting time.
Yeah, we've done what most Canadian-based junior mining or junior exploration companies do in the winter, and we sat down with our data and took a hard look at it, and we've come up with a pretty exciting drill plan that we're now executing on.
Good work. June 18th, 2019, a news release announcing that you're commencing a landmark drill program, free gold mountain property in the Yukon, testing beneath the gold-rich blue sky porphyry and western gold breccia. So this was a program that we talked about in January, and the image of you guys pointing out over the bleachers, over the fence there, of the baseball player stepping up to the plate and setting up for a big swing. Exciting to see you announcing that you have a powerful drill capable of reaching depths of 2,000 meters here. You're setting up for some deep drilling.
That's right. So we've been making over the last couple of years a number of very significant discoveries in the areas that are encompassed within a soil anomaly that surrounds two pre-existing resource areas. So we have a 6-kilometer long area of interest that is basically defined by one of Western North America's largest and most intense soil anomalies. And contained within that, there are two pre-existing resources that have a few million ounces of gold in the resources. And the last few years, we've stepped away from those resources to other areas within the soil anomaly looking for porphyry-style mineralization. And we found porphyry-style mineralization in all of the places that we've looked. And in some of those places, we've hit really high-grade material. So we made a new discovery last year. The blue sky porphyry was about 300 meters of 1.1 gram gold and almost 0.3% copper. And that was one of the best hits for a greenfield-style exploration project looking for porphyries in the world last year. The thing is, we think that everything that's near surface here is just a distant expression of a buried porphyry. Now, in our industry, people talk about how most of the low-hanging fruit is already picked. If you're looking for a big porphyry that's exposed at surface, you're kind of out of luck. People have already found them. But what still remains are porphyries that are buried. And when you're looking for a porphyry that's buried, you have to be able to interpret the surface expression and draw the conclusion that there might be something deeply buried underneath that is better and the source of all those metals. And that's what we think the two resources, the soil anomaly and our new discoveries, are all related to, something that's deeply buried underneath it. So this year, we have scoured our data, looked at the best possibilities for testing that idea, and we've brought in a drill that's capable of drilling to 2,000 meters. We have a one hole that's planned to be 1,600 meters, but we're not going to stop it in mineralization. And we're batting for the fences. We're gonna take this thing as deep as we can into what we hope is going to be a further continuation of Yukon's highest grade porphyry, like what we hit last year.
Yeah, exceptional. It's what an area. Zooming around on Google Earth and stuff, it's amazing to see the evidence of mining in the placer stuff and old historical evidence there. I can imagine what the future of this area looks like, right? There's been a bunch of other news in recent months that all seems to be pointing in the direction of some major growth in the gold mining industry. And in this in this part of the world?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously the kind of work that we're doing is bolstered by the commodities markets, and especially for us, the price of gold. And we have these two resources that we haven't been focusing on at all in the last couple of years, because they're basically not high enough grade to demand a capital investment at current metal prices, or at the metal prices when they were defined. But as the price of gold starts going up, these resources start looking more and more impressive, and then you stack that on top of the exploration potential that we've been defining, and which has basically been what our company has been valued off of for the last couple of years, and we're very highly leveraged to gold, and as other companies are their value is increasing, ours should do that twofold, because we've got double exposure.
And deep drilling makes for higher stakes than usual.
Yeah, so we're lucky that our property is road accessible. We're only 200 kilometers to the north of Whitehorse, and you can drive right onto our property. So we're dragging a drill around on drill roads. It takes like a day to mobilize the drill onto the property from Whitehorse, and that efficiency translates into a very low cost of drilling. So we're looking at a all-in cost of drilling normally of about $250 to $275 per meter all in, and that includes flying people in, geologists in from wherever they live, and food and everything. So we already have a great efficiency for our drilling, but when you start getting deep, drilling costs more, and we've budgeted for basically everything up to 500 meters costing us about $275 a meter, and everything beyond 500 meters costing us double that, so about $600 a meter. And so, yeah, you lose efficiency as you're drilling deeper, and you need to find higher grade material and more voluminous material. But the reward here is potentially phenomenal. We're looking at testing along a 6-kilometer area where the distant expression of the buried porphyry system is already higher grade than any other porphyry system in Yukon. As we grow closer to that heat source, to the porphyry itself, that's where in most porphyry deposits you end up with the highest grade, most voluminous, and most continuous area of mineralization, usually the stuff that's actually mined. So if we can define something like that over kilometers of area, it's all worth it, Peter.
Yeah, certainly. Absolutely. I haven't heard any mention of Supergene or any. Is there any reason to expect that there would be chalcocite blanket kind of?
Yeah, so we have identified on the property a number of areas that have supergene enrichment. We also have oxide gold near surface. It's not as consistent as it's not a no-brainer to try to figure out how to piece that together into a sort of low-cost starter option for mining. Partly because although we've hit it in I think we hit in 2017 we hit a 60-meter section that was almost a gram gold in oxide, and that is a fantastic oxide hit. And then we drilled all around it, and we had shorter intersections of less gold and that sort of thing. And so it's a possibility. It's something that we need to explore further, but it's not our priority this year to look at that.
Well, and it would be surprising to hit it at depth too, right? You wouldn't expect to see that oxidation boundary that low, that far down.
No. So typically in Yukon, you won't see the oxidation to go much beyond 100 meters, with the exception of, really, really permeable faulted zones and that sort of thing. So I think, at Goldcorp's or Newmont Goldcorp's coffee deposit, they have oxide that goes significantly deeper than that, but it's along strongly permeable and discrete zones that are easily oxidized.
Yeah. And I wonder about these deep holes planned for this season. Any talk of wedging off? I always wonder, when you spend so much putting, a first hole down, other ways, downhole geophysics and other things that you might do to try and squeeze more value out of that hole.
Sure. So, we're targeting something that we think is very large. And the idea is that it might be hard to miss. But that being said, you want to take the absolute best stabs at it that you can. So we have two techniques that we're using to target this thing at depth. The first is what we're calling ore fluid vectoring. And that's where we're looking at the areas that already have high-grade mineralization. And there's two of them in particular that we're interested in. One is the blue sky porphyry that we discovered last year, and the other is what we call the WAU breccia, spelled W-A-U, because it has both tungsten and gold in it. And both of those bodies, we've now drilled them with enough holes that we have a lot of confidence in the shape of the mineralized domain. We've modeled it in 3D, and so because we understand the shape of that thing, we're able to drill right down through the neck of it, or neck of them, because there's two of them. And for that reason, we probably won't need to wedge or do any directional drilling or anything like that, because we're simply following a geometry that we already understand. The third way that we're vectoring in on this potential for a large buried porphyry intrusion is with geophysics. And last year we did a deep penetrating IPMT survey, and we defined a very large geophysical anomaly that we call Big Red, and it extends about 2.5 or 3 kilometers along the center of the soil anomaly, right exactly where we had proposed that there might be this large body of mineralization. Normally, a lot of the time, a company will run a geophysical program and define targets based on that geophysical anomaly alone. In our case, we came up with a geological hypothesis, and then we ran geophysics, and the geophysics showed there to be a target exactly where we already thought there might be one. So we're now using that geophysics to refine the location of a couple of drill holes that we're going to drill right down into the middle of this thing. And, at minimum, we're going to find that there's metal in the ground because that's what the geophysics is saying is there.
Wonderful. Yeah, thank you. The MT there, very impressive to hear about. To see these lines, right, and big lines that were done. I see the plan of the IP survey. MT is a little different. I see Big Red there. The depth extent of that target, is that, that looks like, I don't see a number on the section on one of the slides that I'm looking at here, but that's 600 plus meters, is it? Is it, what kind of a range?
The top of the soil of Big Red, in the center of the area, the soil anomaly, is somewhere around 450 meters for the outlying sort of high up parts of it, and that's basically deeper than we've ever drilled in those areas. Our deepest drill hole on the property is just over 600 meters, but it's an inclined hole, so it only tested to a depth of less than 500 meters, actual depth. And so almost all of the chargeability anomaly that we call Big Red is completely untested by drilling, yet overlying Big Red, there's a resource at Revenue that's got 1 million ounces gold in it. And that's not even in something that's especially chargeable. So, yeah. And then if you follow Big Red all the way to the west, in a part of it that's not circled, but if you look up to the west, you'll see it basically comes close to surface. And that's the only place where that chargeability anomaly has been well tested by drilling. And that's at Nucleus, which is a multi-million ounce gold, epithermal gold deposit.
And the extent of that, going from Revenue to Nucleus here, kilometers.
That's right. Yeah, we're looking at about 4.5 kilometers with the area that encompasses Revenue and Nucleus, and then another 2 kilometers off to the east to include the Blue Sky Zone, which, although it doesn't have a resource, is host to the new porphyry that we discovered last year. So, there's real proof of concept here that this entire 6 kilometer area is not just mineralized because of leakage from 2 little deposit areas, but rather it's a continuous porphyry-related hydrothermal system that's got to be driven by something that's lying underneath.
Yeah, and to see those hot spots on the IP and MT at depth extending, fairly continuously between those two, that's pretty impressive anomaly at depth, that kind of matches up the soil anomaly that's seen as well, right? And I'm sure it might seem, too big to some, explorationists. I'm sure some people would be scared off by, right, layers of information that are kind of lining up like that. But, to take a step back and to look again at the geology and the structural setting, right, with the 2 sides of the Big Creek Fault there and some kind of a dilation going on. I've heard you describe what's happened in this particular area right around Nucleus and Revenue and how crustal scale things may be going on. So it's lining all that up. I guess it makes me wonder if it's a little bit more reasonable to expect, something unusual and massive really going on here.
Yeah, that's right. It's we're in a very unique geological environment where we have a very important crustal scale fault, the Big Creek Fault, running right through our property. It's a controlling structure for mineralization all the way up into Alaska. And it's an important controlling structure for Newmont Goldcorp's Coffee deposit, which is just along strike of us. And on our property, the Big Creek Fault breaks into 2 segments, and those 2 segments allowed for the Earth's crust to pull apart and at a jog between the 2 segments, and that created a low pressure domain high in the Earth's crust, and that allowed an intrusion to come to very high crustal level. And that's a prerequisite for porphyries, but it's a very uncommon environment in Yukon. Most of the intrusions in Yukon either never made it to high crustal level, or the ones that did are now deeply eroded. So whatever was there is gone now. One of the only other ones that did make it to high crustal level is the patent porphyry. And that's a porphyry that is the causative intrusion for the billion-ton Casino deposit, which is also along strike of us to the northwest. Now, in that case, we see the causative intrusion exposed at surface. That patent porphyry is 75 million years old, and all of the mineralization that we have on our property is 75 million years old as well. The difference between Casino and us is that at Casino, their 75-million-year-old porphyry intrusion is right at surface. But for us, we're looking at rock that's 105 million years old at surface, that's hosting 75-million-year-old mineralization. And to us, that means it's really a silver bullet for understanding that there has to be an intrusion at depth, because there's always an intrusion that's the same age as mineralization in a porphyry system. It's called the causative intrusion. It's not what we see at surface, because what we see at surface is 105 million years old. So there's got to be something under there. And it's very likely something that's the size or even bigger than the patent porphyry, which is responsible for the Casino porphyry deposit. And the same age as the Casino deposit.
Yes, exactly right. Yeah. The layers of information, right? Funny to hear you saying about the different ages there. I've heard you say it before, but I think I might have understood it a little bit better here. I think the third time getting it from you.
Yeah, geochronology, like looking at the ages of rocks, is a really important part of the science, but it's a complicated one, and it's when you start talking about millions and billions of years, it's hard for people that don't have it as part of their vernacular to follow sometimes.
Well, and the sequencing too, right? Like I've heard things about, overprinting and some of these multiple phases, of events that have some kind of reference of understanding for that. But what you're talking about with, the older one, I guess it wasn't clear to me that there was an older intrusion that you are seeing at surface in this area.
That's right. Well, I mean, what we've been doing here is really an evolution of ideas. And when I first looked at this property in 2016, I had a different theory about what was going on. I thought that lightning had struck on this property twice, that there were two mineralizing events, that there was one at 105 million years old that was porphyry related, and then a second event that was 75 million years old, and that they were overprinting one another. Both through more robust geological interpretation, looking at the rocks, and getting more geochronological data, and piecing everything together, at this point, there's only one explanation for what we see. And it's an explanation that explains all the data. When you have data that's unexplained or unexplainable by whatever your hypotheses are, there's something wrong. And there's always been something wrong on this property with our interpretation until we said, okay, it's all one event, and it's from an intrusion that we don't see at surface. And when we applied that hypothesis to the data, all of a sudden, all the data fit. So we have a tremendous amount of geochronology now. There's a master's student, Melissa Friend, who is doing a geochronology-based thesis at MDRU UBC. And we also have a bunch of historical geochronological data. And as I was saying, all of the mineralization and everything related to the mineralization, so hydrothermal alteration and that sort of thing, are all 75 million years old, but it's all hosted in rock that's 105 million years old. So that 105 million year old rock is a passive host. And we need to get down to the actual causative intrusion to see how good this thing can actually be. The thing is, though, even though we're distant from it, and even though we're not at the causative intrusion, we still have tremendous mineralization. Can you imagine that we have two resources here that amount to millions of ounces of gold? We've already hit mineralization that's higher grade than anything that was ever hit at Casino, and they've got thousands of drill holes into that thing. And we think that what we're looking at is just a distant expression of it. That's why we're so excited to find out what happens with this deep drilling.
Well, and thank you for saying before that there was a hole maybe 600 meters long, maybe reaching 400-meter depth. The deep holes this year, are we talking about vertical holes or inclined holes?
Right. So our historical deepest hole was just over 600 meters. Most of the area under the soil anomaly has not been tested to a vertical extent of greater than 300 meters. All of our holes this year are planned to go deeper than 600 meters. We have one that's planned to go to 1,600 meters. And just for context, if you think about, when some of the deep holes that have really blown the tops off of other porphyry systems, I think it was a 1,200-meter hole at Red Chris that really was a game changer for that deposit. If you look at the holes that were drilled at SolGold's Cascabel project in Ecuador, they didn't really hit the high-grade material that made that project exciting until they got to 800 meters. And that was in like a 1,600-meter deep hole, I think, one of the first holes that they were drilling down through the porphyry material. So it's it's risky because these holes are expensive, and you kind of put all your eggs into one basket when you do these kinds of tests. But they tend to blow the tops off of porphyries, and not just the porphyries they're exploring for, but they're game changers for whole districts, because all of a sudden other sub-economic porphyry systems in the same districts start doing deep drilling, and all of a sudden they're zeroing in on the high temperature causative intrusions, and their mineralization is becoming higher grade and more continuous, and that's the kind of thing that makes deposits.
It's nice to have some sense of the deposit model here too, and what the process of discovery looks like potentially. It's kind of this question about going back to the drawing board, right? With the resource estimates that were done, and you coming in with a different interpretation, and this field season that's upon us right now. It's impressive stuff. And as much as, I'm kind of, it's a little awe-inspiring for me to think about, this kilometers of extent at surface and the kilometers down, just the scale of everything that you're talking about here, right? And the fact that, one deep hole can even have a chance of providing information that would be, make it or break it type information in terms of this particular concept. And impressive stuff all around, as I say.
Yeah, thanks, Peter. It's been an amazing couple of years exploring this property. We started in 2016 just with an idea that the pre-existing resources were contained within a broader porphyry system. And then we spent the last 2 years exploring that idea and discovered a whole bunch of really interesting porphyry mineralization, enough that our shareholders and stock base were able to continue to support very aggressive drill programs. And the ideas just keep on changing. Little by little, we end up refining them. And, it's partly luck, because as we refine those ideas, we end up with hypotheses that lead us in the direction of bigger and better things.
Yeah.
But I've worked lots of projects. In fact, most of the projects I've worked in my career are ones where, as you do more drilling, as you do more exploration, your constraints on what you're likely to find make it so that you think there's going to be probably less and less.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the nature of exploration. That's why so many properties are worked and then dropped. But everything that we've done on this property has led us to the idea that things are even bigger, even better than what we originally thought they might be. And that's, I guess, a hallmark trait of exploring a property that's going to end up being a winner.
Yeah. I like the best projects get better the more you work them. I agreed wholeheartedly. And there's so many aspects of that too. These different areas at the Free Gold Mountain Project, right? The Irene is very, very interesting. All the way across 34 kilometers long, 200 something kilometers squared area. There's a lot of opportunities still across and at surface too, right? So I hope that there's some some other programs planned for some, cheaper, simpler, but still meaningful work programs, for this season to balance things off. But really taking the big swing there is, as I say again, impressive. And the non-core assets as well, the stories behind some of those, again, a lot of good fortune and good preparation as well too, right? And just good systematic work approach from everything I've heard from you in the past.
Thanks, Peter. Yeah, we've been working pretty hard on maintaining our pipeline projects. What we're doing at Revenue and in the Revenue Nucleus area where we're drilling these deep holes is really, it's a risky move. We're doing something that in our business we call drill to kill. And that's where you don't hedge your bets. You don't leave it untested. You just go for it. And really, it's the best bang for your buck for your shareholders. But it can leave you dead in the water if you do that kind of test and you don't hit. Fortunately for us, we're in a situation where, first of all, we already have pre-existing resources. But second of all, we've got a bunch of really robust pipeline projects, and a lot of them are on the same property. The Free Gold Mountain property, which has this Revenue Nucleus system, like you said, is 34 kilometers from end to end, 200 square kilometers in total area, and it's got about 100 showings on it that have been explored since about the 1930s. And so we're advancing a lot of those pipeline projects. One of them you mentioned is Irene. That's an epithermal vein system that was exposed at the bottom of a placer mine in 2013 and 2014. It was mapped by one of our geologists over about 140 meters of exposure at the bottom of a creek. He got multi-gram gold over multi-meter channel samples that he cut out at the bottom of this creek. On every channel he sampled, he got multi-gram gold over multi-meters. Then last year, we decided to drill that target, and we drilled it over a 450-meter strike length. And we, again, made multi-gram intersections over multiple meters in every single hole. Now, the really interesting thing about Irene is that if you take a look at the direction that vein is going, this is a vein that's at the bottom of Free Gold Mountain. And if you follow the direction that vein goes, it leads straight up to the top of the ridge. And right there at the top of the ridge, about 3 kilometers away, is another vein that was drilled by the old timers back in the 60s and 70s called the Gold Star vein. And it points straight down towards Irene. And that vein also has multi-gram gold over multiple meters in every single drill hole. Now, if you hypothesize that those two veins connect to one another, you've got about a 3.9 kilometer strike length of epithermal vein system. But even more important than that, because the Irene is at the bottom of the mountain and the Gold Star is at the top, you've got about a 550 meter variation in elevation. Now, if you look at most epithermal vein systems, the highest grade mineralization, the part that's mined, is contained within just a 200 meter vertical envelope. For us, there's about 350 meters of totally unexplored vertical extent along the mountainside in between these two explored veins. And it's completely undercover. It's never been drilled. There's one trench that crosses it. And that trench has a 450-gram gold grab sample. So we think that there's a pretty good chance that as we chase this thing between those two locations that has been exposed at the top and the bottom of the mountain, that not only are we going to show that there's a very long strike length, but we have a chance of tagging into a part of the vertical extent that may be host to much higher grade mineralization.
Yeah, certainly. And looking at the map of the project area too, there's this noticeable kind of jag in the Mount Freegold Road and this valley that it traces along, right? Road's kind of heading northwest, southeast, and then boom, right around Irene there, it just heads off 90 degrees in the other direction, heading northeast and goes up around some kind of a mountain or a ridge there, and where you have revenue in Nucleus. I wonder, surface expression of structural geology possibly. And
absolutely, yeah. All of those irregular shapes that we see in there are related to faults that have caused, mostly faults related to the Big Creek Fault, which have busted up the rock and made it so that it's more easily weathered away, and that's why you end up with valleys where they are. And certainly the splays off of that fault. So Gooder Gulch, where Irene is, that's where a splay off of the Big Creek Fault runs straight up Freegold Mountain. And these splays off of these faults are basically ore fluid conduits. That's where these fluids are concentrating, and they've got gold in them. And when they reach certain pressures or temperatures or chemical conditions, the gold precipitates out, and we end up with these nice epithermal gold systems.
Well, and all this juice in the system, right? To have a sense of where it might be coming from, and to be putting a hole into that horizon here in the next weeks is just a pretty special place to be.
That's right. Yeah, it's an exciting year for us. These deep drill holes are exciting to drill, and we started our drilling just about 2 weeks ago now, and we've started in the Wowbrecha, and we completed our first hole in the Wowbrecha. We're drilling our second hole right now. We have two holes planned for that area, and then we're going to move over to the Blue Sky Porphyry area and drill our 2 deep holes over there. So things are well underway. It's happening. We'll be putting out news probably in late July or early August about the results from Wowbrecha.
Great, wonderful. And timelines beyond that for the deep holes? Any sense of what to look for, what to watch?
Yeah, so we'll probably be putting out our news stepwise based on the areas that we're drilling. So the first area is the Wowbrecha. We'll put out that news as we're able to, and it's always hard to. You need to be careful about people's expectations about the timing of news releases, because you never know what's going to happen with the data. The lab could be backed up, or you could have quality control issues and need to retest some of the samples, that sort of thing. But if everything goes according to plan, we'll have the Wowbrecha information out in late July, and then it's going to take us a month at least to drill the Blue Sky Porphyry with those 2 deep holes, probably more than a month. So a month following Wowbrecha, you can start getting an eye out for Blue Sky Porphyry, and then after that, we'll be drilling the geophysical targets into Big Red, and those results won't be out until probably late fall, early winter. And
the potential for surprises there in that deep hole, I guess, could this just plain vanilla porphyry, or the potential for really some surprising stuff based on deep connections to the mantle?
Yeah, I hardly ever have drilled a hole that didn't have some surprises. And, all the more so for a long, deep hole.
Yeah.
So yeah, we're definitely, one of the things we've been very seriously dedicated to over the last 2 years while we've been drilling this project is thinking on our feet and changing the drill program as necessary. We never would have hit the blue sky porphyry last year if we hadn't have changed our drill plan partway through the program based on what we were seeing in earlier holes that we had drilled. So we were vectoring as we were drilling. And that's exactly what we're doing this year. So, we're ready for surprises and ready to adjust the drill program to optimize it based on a continually changing understanding of the geology.
Yeah.
Nothing we're doing is set in stone, and we expect there to be surprises. We're excited for the surprises.
Well, and on the corporate side too, there's the potential for surprises here. Gold Corp as a 18% shareholder, and the gold space heating up, right? Changes. Newmont might decide, they like what they're seeing in this first set of results, or things could move quickly here.
That's right. Yeah. So our Newmont Gold Corp is one of our largest shareholders. Gold Corp had topped up to about 19.9% in the last financing. I think they're less than that right now because of dilution from people exercising warrants and that sort of thing. But they're still a very major shareholder and following what we're doing very closely. I've met with their technical guys quite a number of times over the last few months, and yeah, I'm excited for them to be following the project, and we're kind of primed for people to be excited about what we're doing. We've gotten the message out that we've got a great big target, not just to the retail market and investors, but to major mining companies. We've had interest from not just Newmont Gold Corp, but a number of major mining companies, and I know that they are following us really closely and are excited about what we're doing. And if we make a big hit like we think we're going to, it's going to be out for the races.
Well, this is it. This would be the future on the other side of that, right? Things just open up in so many ways. I wish you the best of luck with it.
Oh, well, thanks a lot, Peter. I appreciate it.
Mr. Tony Baressi, Triumph Gold, thank you very much.
Been my pleasure. Thanks,
Goodbye.
Peter.